In the sixth section of his Poetics, Aristotle elaborates further on the constituent elements of the tragedy just after he has defined what is a tragedy. We see that there are six elements in a tragedy: plot, character, thought, diction, spectacle, and melody. Now, of these, he says that the melody and the diction are the means of imitation. All right, medium or means of imitation. And spectacle is the manner of imitation. That is, since tragedy is a drama or a play, the manner of the presentation or imitation will be through visual representation. So that is why it is called the manner. But object of imitation are plot, character, and thought. Actually, in the very beginning of the Poetics, he had differentiated between object of imitation and manner of imitation on the one hand, and then later manner and means of imitation, or rather, we can say he had differentiated among object, manner, and means of any imitation. In case of tragedy, plot, character, and thought are the object of imitation. That is what a poet is going to imitate. That is the object or the goal. Means of imitation, through what they are imitating, that is diction, because finally they have to written in words. If you write a tragedy, and melody, songs have to be there, so these are the means. And spectacle is the manner, finally they will be represented. If you look at it closely, actually means and manner are more or less the same thing, but both are methods. So for our convenience of understanding, we can internally combine these two and say that plot, character, and thought are the object of imitation, and diction, melody, and spectacle are the methods of that imitation. Now, he, while elaborating on it further, gives definition of each of these parts. Character and thought, he says, one has to distinguish. Character, he says, is that what makes us ascribe certain moral qualities to the agents. And thought is shown in all they say when proving a particular point, or it may be enunciating a general truth. So, character here is not exactly used in the sense of dramatis personae as such, but then as we use the character, the term character in a moral sense, basically, that such and such is a man of character. So, Aristotle's wording character as an element of a play is not merely a technical enumeration of the actors or the roles, but it has a broad emphasis on the moral purpose of those characters. So it is inseparable from their morality. However, all these, he says, will come to play only when a plot is there, a well-lit plot. And here comes the most important, or rather the most controversial point of Aristotle's tragedy or Aristotle's Poetics. He says that plot, as it were, is the soul of tragedy. Character comes only second. That is, without a good plot, there cannot be a good tragedy, but there may be one without characters. To explain this, a lot of critics have worked hard and confused themselves and confused us also. R.S. Scott James, following Aristotle only, he says that let us understand it like this. Why? Because I'm repeating, it is difficult for us to imagine literally what he has said. How can there be a tragedy without character? Though there can be without, I mean, though plot is required, but character is also required. In our sense, they are inseparable. So when Aristotle says that there can be a tragedy without characters, but there cannot be one without a plot, we are confused. R.S. Scott James interprets this like this, that when you have a well defined plot, then even if characters are weak or not that pronounced, then also your play will be successful. Just as it is Aristotle's own example, if you throw a lot of color haphazardly, paints colors on a sheet of paper, it will not generate any good impression. But even if you draw a beautiful sketch with a pencil with marked borders, just a sketch, that will create a better impression because you are delineating the feature shape limits. So, this is the hidden meaning of what he meant by plot is primary. So, you must have a well defined structure of what you are going to present, and it is not necessary that you include all different kinds of character without thinking about your plot. In this regard, Aristotle's prescription or description is exactly the opposite of the Bollywood movies or commercial movies. We have certain kinds of characters in all movies: hero, heroine, villain, etc. And more or less, all the stories are repetition of the same love episode. So they do not have any well defined plot as such. That is what Aristotle meant by saying that plot is the soul of the tragedy. Characters come only second. That is, we need not take it literally. Characters will be there literally, but then without a good plot, it will not be a good tragedy. Because all these six are constituent parts. Tragedy cannot happen without any one of them, though if practically speaking, if tragedy can take place without any one of the elements, that is spectacles, that is visual representation, and Aristotle rather is in favor of that. He does not prefer visual representation much because he is an intellectual. So he says that tragedy should be such that even by reading it or hearing it being recited, one is able to get the tragic sense. And those tragedies or those poets who cannot generate the tragic feeling without the visual representation or spectacle, or as you would say, acting today, they are the lesser poets. Their tragedies are the lesser tragedies. So he is always in favor of suggestiveness, insinuation, symbolism rather than gross presentation. That is why I often say Aristotle is arguably the most ancient literary critic, and yet, in so many respects, he is the most modern. He is the modernist of all. Why I said most ancient? Because Socrates and Plato were there before him, and some other philosophers also, who made observations on art here and there, but their primary interest was not in literary criticism. But Aristotle, he of course was a man of all seasons, but when he did poetics, he gave his full attention to whatever was available there in writing or in acting, etc. So I hope it is clear to you why he said that spectacle may not be there, but then other elements may be there. Even melody may not be there. It may not be put to songs, tunes, or sung out by a by presenter. So basic four are the plot, character, thought, and diction. Diction primarily means choice of words from which your dictionary comes. So without words, nothing will happen. So these four are the primary, and then melody and spectacle are slightly secondary. This is also his position regarding the differentiation between epic and tragedy, but we'll come to that later. So, having said that plot is the most important part, in the next section, he talks about the completeness of a plot. A tragic plot should be complete. A tragedy is an imitation of an action that is complete in itself. He says that I have already said that tragedy is the imitation of an action which is complete in itself as a whole of some magnitude, for a whole baby of no magnitude to speak of. So just imagine, suddenly in a marketplace, a bomb is thrown and many people die. And one of them died tragically, maybe related to Aristotle's idea of tragedy. But then it all happens in 5 minutes, right? So that cannot be the proper subject of tragedy, also. You have to make out a play of at least 3 to 4 hours, 5 hours. So there comes the question of magnitude. And at the same time, you should not make a plot which continues for days and months together. Again, like serials in our televisions. When we were slightly younger, there was a serial called Chandrakanta in Doordarshan, if I remember correctly. Yes, after the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, then there was Chandrakanta. And it never ended. Uh, Possibly Doordarshan asked them to quit. The same it was probably true of serials like Bohu Bhi Kabhi Saas Thi, this and that, or whatever. So they just go on and on and on without any vision or mission. So those kinds of things are strict no. A magnitude should be there, and ideally, in brief, Aristotle's idea of magnitude is it should neither be too long nor too short, and it should begin at the beginning and end at the end. Though this sounds rather tautological or stating the obvious, but it is not so. I will explain this in details in our regular classes, because it seems now our regular classes will start soon, which is a good news. So, a story or plot must be of some length, but of a length to be taken in by the memory. Epic like the Mahabharata, if one makes a play out of the whole, it will run for days and it cannot be taken in by memory. To the contrary, a 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or 5 minutes play that may also be there. Suddenly, a murder take place and people die, you end the story. That is also not the ideal form. So, moderation. The same thing he says in diction also. Words should not be too old or too new, not too pedantic, not too vulgar. So Aristotle is the great prophet of moderation. That is why the very word golden mean is associated with Aristotle, avoiding the extremes. Now, in the section 8, poetics, in the eighth section of the poetics, which is very important from a particular point of view, that of unity. There he categorically states that one must follow the unity of action basically. And he says that unity does not come from all the stories or tales, in a particular word being related to one person. Not that. But there has to be cause and effect relationship. So he says that the unity of plot does not consist, as some suppose, in its having one man as its subject. An infinity of things befall that one man, some of which it is impossible to reduce to unity, and in the like manner, there are many actions of one man which cannot be made to form one action. One sees, therefore, the mistake of all the poets who have written a Heraclid, a Thesid, or similar poems. They suppose that because Heracles was one man, the story of Heracles must be one story. That is a mistake, Heracles or Hercules. So, since you know the story of Hercules, you write a play about Hercules and then include all incidents there, right from his birth to his death. Aristotle finds this stupid. That cannot be a subject of tragedy or even epic. Though epic allows greater space, a larger space to include everything, there also, when you read minutely, Aristotle is in favor of precision. Possibly keeping this in mind, Shakespeare had said long after Aristotle that brevity is the soul of wit. Those who are witty or those who are intelligent, they do not say a lot many things, but we teachers have to say so that you understand. Otherwise, I also don't say, by the way, in the passing. So I'm intelligent, I think. Now, anyway, so coming to this unity part, we have to understand another thing. Often, many people or students and even teachers mistakenly think that three unities are related to Aristotle. No, unities of time, place, and action, they were added during the Renaissance by Italian critics. Aristotle primarily spoke about unity of action only. Yes, he was a stickler so far as this unity of action is concerned. That is, whatever small actions, incidents you include in a tragedy, your target is to combine them to one another in such a way that they form one great action or they lead to one great action. Suppose murder of, say, we can say Claudius in Hamlet, or say death of Hamlet, that is the subject of your tragedy. So you need not include everything that happened in Hamlet's life. Shakespeare also avoided including everything, but certain things he added, I'm sure Aristotle would have rejected. The Ophelia episode, for example, Hamlet Ophelia, a tragedy of Hamlet is perfectly possible without the Ophelia episode also. This was definitely included to bring a romantic angle, but then the sharpness of tragedy was possibly lost. Aristotle is in favor of that kind of factless tragedy, precise, to the point. Only include those points which are absolutely necessary and lead to Hamlet's murder. So Hamlet's father murder and then automatic dethronement because he was murdered and the uncle's usurpation and marrying his mother, these are sufficient to create the rift between Hamlet and his uncle and then leading to the murder. So their Ophelia story need not have been included. I'm sure Aristotle would have said that. So that way again our Bollywood movies are the burning examples of what Aristotle did not ask one to do. If you see a 3 hours movie, uh, you know, the main plot of that can be covered in 45 minutes to 1 hour. The rest, there will be mostly unnecessary things. 14 songs of 5 minutes each or 10 minutes each, item song, this and that. Some comic scene, even very vulgar comic scene, so they are stupid. This kinds of things are very stupid, so they are not, I mean, according to Aristotle, not me, I would rather condone this kind of inclusiveness, but Aristotle would not. So that is why please remember that when you are writing a tragedy, if you are a writer, or an epic also for that matter, though nobody writes epic these days it seems, you can replace it with novel, which is the epic of the modern world. So you need not write everything that happened to a person's life, even though your purpose is to show that rise or even fall of that person. That is the job of a biographer, biography or autobiography. Your job is to take some major incident of this person's life, could be his fall or even death if he is already dead, for a tragedy, and then you include only those incidents from that person's life in your play, in your novel, which have directly contributed to the person's death or downfall. You need not include everything. So I hope that aspect is clear. So in this, in saying all this, we have today discussed three very important sections: 6, 7, and 8. In section 9, he says something more important, which is in a way direct counter to Plato's theory of literature spreading falsehood. We'll do it in a separate video so that it is not taxing for you. Thank you for listening to me.